There's a lot of magic to using pigment to make it look like light. And a lot of people throw around something called OSL, which stands for Object Source Lighting.
Yep, that is correct. And today we're going to take a look at how to do that and how to approach that kind of concept. There's a lot of ways, there's a lot of observation in this technique, I think, that you need to really look at the way light is cast across objects and the way that is sourcing and the intensity of the light being cast as it's closer to the object casting the light, and then the effects that that color being cast has on the pigment that lies beneath it. So we're going to jump around a little bit.
It's deep.
Yes. And
we're going to paint an Orc Shaman.
That's right, a Weirdnob Shaman, and he's wearing a zebra skin shawl, I guess you could call it, and
cape.
That was a cape, which is inspired by this Uriah Heep album. Not their best album, but I am a fan, so you wind up with the So-So records. Checking it out.
There's a story behind him.
That's right, inspired by music, so... Yeah, we're just going to work on the internal glow coming out of the top of his staff and see what happens.
Cool.
So the first step we're going to do to get this going is we need to get some color on the smoke, so I'm going to do some wet blending. And to do that, you can kind of see my palette down in the corner there. I've got some shadow gray from Vallejo, black and white. There's a little in-between color between the shadow gray and the white. So, I'll start this off. Let's take a little black, start putting it just on the whole general area. And then I'll throw the blue closer to the top of the smoke. I'm just slapping it on there real quick, and I'll kind of come and pick the details out later. Smoke is, GW needs to figure out what smoke looks like. Sometimes it's like scratchy, sometimes it's bubbly. So on the bubbly stuff, I am attempting to put the highlights on top of the bubbles, if that makes sense. And then, because we're wet blending, while it's all wet down towards the bottom right here, I'll take some of the base color for my lighting effect, probably with a clean brush. And I'll throw it in there nice and heavy, just laying down kind of a base layer to work on top of. Make sure your blends are smooth enough. And then the way that, so you see the smoke kind of comes out of the top of the skull, curls back around. I was watching lightning the other night inside of these clouds, and it was kind of crazy looking, so it was like illuminated from the inside of the cloud. Smoke behaves that way too when there's light being cast up into it, especially when it's thick and magical like this. So on this underside here, I'll throw a little bit more green as it curves back around the light source. It'll catch more of that illumination. So there you can see I've got a really rough start. I'll take some of that green and start wet blending it in on the bottom sides of these bubbles to further reflect that interior glowing property. Just like so. A little on the top. A little more because it's not showing up. But yeah, you can see it's starting to get there. So I'm going to complete this step and then we'll be on to some layering. All right, so there's my first layer of wet blending. I mean, while the camera's off, there's a little back and forth. It took me maybe 15 or 20 minutes. So it's not entirely magic, but I didn't want you guys to have to watch every single brush stroke. But you can see I've got the green laid in there, and then since the green is shining upwards, out of the dome of the skull. It's catching on the bottom sides of some of the clouds and whatnot. So now I'm just going to go with the separate colors, not wet blending, and just kind of refine what I've already laid down. So I've got some of this Necrotite green from P3. And I'm just going to reinforce the tones there. I'm adding kind of like this is a little bit more of a washy coat. See, I want it to sink inside of these crevices, the smoke. So it still looks like we're going for an internal glow. But yeah, I'm not being like super precise. I'm letting gravity do a little bit of the work for me. Slightly watered down paint, but nothing too crazy. And I've got like a big pocket of light up in there. Just reinforce that a little bit. And then on the tops of the plumes of smoke, I've got a little the lighter shadow gray and white mixture. So I'm going to be glazing those, or that up on the top of those. Like so. You can see I'm using a larger brush because it kind of does some soaking up when I don't have to be so precise for my blends. This really works for pushing my paint around. Like you see, I'm always making a stroke towards where I want the highlight to end up. I'm not going up and down. It's always kind of a sweeping motion. You want to think about paint on the molecular scale, and every brush stroke you're making is creating texture for the next coat to lay on top of. So if you pull back and forth, it's going to be pretty rough. And if you brush it all in the same direction, you're going to get a smoother result. You'll see that there's kind of a puddle that turns up, and you can kind of swish that into place. Of course, doing like the top of a circle is kind of a little more tricky as far as pushing and pulling in the right direction, because you got to do it from all sides. But there's enough little edges on this that we can just like tuck it right up next to the green glow or the shadow area. Yeah, getting there. So the next color, moving along, I've got some just white mixed in with a necrotite green. I'm not sure if I want to go all yellowy on this glow or not, so I just have some off to the side. And watered down again. I'm just gonna put the wash in there more towards the base this time. Kind of moving, so you're moving the gradient along. You can see in there. And it'll dry out and desaturate a little bit less, and that's why you do multiple passes. You don't want total coverage on the first pass. If you're getting that, your paint's probably a little too thick. Get inside the nostrils there. And the underside. It's going to be collecting a lot of light. Yeah, so that's really starting to come along. So another like property of OSL is that the glow is cast off of the model, and it's cast on, or off of the origin, the source of the light, and it hits other parts of the model. So you can see on my palette here, I have some of the necrotite green, but I also have some of the base color I used for the bone. So I can mix some of the ivory in with the green if I want to get a 50-50 mix, you know, creating as the light crosses over the certain colors, they're going to combine a little bit, you know, like anyone that's looked at a campfire or held anything up to a fire, if you ever do that. But long story short, I've got some ivory mixed in the necrotite green. I'm going to throw that around the edges where the light would be creeping over. Just like so, and then it'll be catching on the tips of these horns. I use a little bit darker green for that one. I'm using darker green because there's, the kind of fading effect. The further away from the light source, the darker the color is, the glow color is going to be until it eventually dies out. So you want to throw a little bit of your darker color down, and then the brighter one towards the tip. Move back to the ivory, just for saturation. I'll throw some on the top of the eyebrows too, because they're protruding out. Then a little closer to the skull, top of the ribbons, or wrappings. Ribbons doesn't sound tough enough. All right. And I'm working with that brighter white mixed in the necrotite green. So you can see where I'm going with all this. I'll put another wash into the dome. So the color's gonna build up a little bit. I'll go back and do these coats maybe 3 or 4 times, just kind of thin layers passing back and forth. And yeah, so I'm just gonna refine those a little bit more. All right, so I did a little bit more layering up my brighter colors, and you can see the effect is starting to take place if you look at it from the top here versus checking it out from the bottom angle. Yeah. So we're getting some good light going, and now to kind of knock everything into place, I'm going to do some hard lining. So I've got a little bit of my shadow gray mixed into white, brighter color. And I'm just going to push that right up next to some of the shadows. Going for a lot of contrast. Yeah, so you can see that starting to happen. And then I'll take my highlight color again, which is just white mixed with necrotite green. And a little less diluted this time, and a little closer to the brain pan. I'll be throwing the bright colors in. I'm also going to start throwing some brighter highlights down on the tips of these horns, the tops, the little ridges, where light would be cast down on top of the war banding, holding the horns in place, not the ribbons. So yeah, it's really starting to, the effect is starting to take form now. I had some edge highlighting with that brighter color around the top edge of the skull, top of the brows because they're sticking out a little bit. Blend that one in. And moving around to the back. The sculpt gets a little weird, but I can kind of sketch it on and line it out there to define the top edge. Plant some of my brighter color up here on the underside of the second plume. Dropping it inside the eyeballs and the nose holes. Glaze the highlights onto the tips again. Just real gradual for smoothness. Extra smoothness. Flip it around to the underside, and now we're you can see I've been pulling my highlight from the origin source again on these lumpy clouds. So I'll push my brighter color along that highlighted area that I already have started. Yeah. So now it's starting to take shape. It's getting there. I can see a spot up here that could use some Cool. So it's getting there. We'll come back and I'll do some ink washing. All right. So I've got my tones laid down and it's time to build up that brighter foundation on the interior of the smoke with some ink washing. So got my FW inks again, and I just got the super bright limey green, titled light green, and then some pure white. You can see on my palette here is the white and the green, and then a mixture of the two. Take a little bit of my retardant and water to thin it down. Don't want to be laying down too much ink. I prefer to do a thin amount and kind of push it around because it carries a lot of pigment. But following up on the highlighting we were doing on the inside of the skull, I'm just gonna push my ink in there. And if I happen to like blot a big puddle, that's all right. I'll keep taking from that area to spread around on the rest of the model. Really want this area to stick out too. It's looking cool. And then I can kind of skim it along a lot of the lower edges to smooth everything out, the lower glowing portions of the model. And I'll hit those little horn tips again with the ink, that upper edge. Just real faint. I'm just kind of swiping it on there. And could probably use a little on top here. Inside of the eye sockets and the nose hole again. I'm using a little bit more because the ink is gonna kind of tend to pool in the middle of the bowl-like form of the eye socket. Yeah, you can see it taking shape there. And the ink creates a lot of, really adds to the brightness because of its high pigmentation. It's fun to use ink for light sourcing, as you can see. And now that I'm thinking of it, I see this upper portion of the jaw and the jawbone. I could probably pull, I'm exaggerating things a little bit, but for the sake of coolness, I'm just going to pull some onto those upper areas. It's just some of the necrotite green paint. Smooth out those eyebrows again. Push it towards the base of the horn. Yeah. Now we're really getting somewhere. Just the very tips of this jaw thing here. These metal plates. Tiny bit on that one tooth. Yeah. He's getting there. Just gonna go and do another pass of ink washes now. Because I did a thinner coat so it dries a little faster. Which when you're laying down many thin layers, that works to your advantage. And that upper plume again, just to increase the saturation. Cool. And that is how OSL works. I'll attach it to the model later, which he's right here. I call him Mr. Snakes. It's kind of an inside joke, but sculpted some extra snakes onto him based on this joke from a painting jam I had with my buddy. It's got all kinds of cool texture going on with the zebra skin, and yeah, I'll be able to pull a little bit of green down on top of his horns, on top of his biggest snake, on his face. I'll color his eyes in and make the area kind of glowing outward from his eyes. But yeah, you'll see that all in the end, and I hope this kind of helps shed some light onto the OSL subject. I didn't realize I was making a pun, but I hope you enjoyed this. can always, like I say in the other videos, you can always take this a little further, which I'm going to do with a little bit more edge highlighting and a little more low lighting with my bright colors to get things together. But this is my basic approach, and I'm just going to keep following up on that, and you can see the end result. And I'm Sam from samsonminis.blogspot.com if you want to check that out. It's my blog. Thanks to Adam and the whole crew at Tabletop Minions. It's been awesome, and we'll see you next time.